Welcome into the Inside Scoop, live from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm your host, Josh Newberg, and I spent my morning fishing the Vanderbilt goalpost out of the Cumberland. What a weekend of college football. We're going to break it all down, and I'm going to tell you how this all impacts recruiting. Today, we got Georgia, we got LSU, we got some Oregon talk, we got a whole lot more, and I'm excited about today's show. But before we get going, guys, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of football, and we need you guys locked in, so hit subscribe for me, please. And also, been thinking about joining On3? Well, I can get you there right now for just $1. Go to on3.com, use promo code BERG1. If you want to read everything that Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons, Pete Nakos, all the insiders, go to on3.com. Sign up for $1 using promo code BERG1. All right, let's take a look real quick at the recruiting rankings. On top, we got Ohio State. They have been maintaining that spot for quite a while. Alabama at 2, LSU, Auburn, Georgia, Texas at 6. We got USC into the top 10 at number 10. Oklahoma, Miami, Notre Dame, all knocking on the door trying to get in. That's 11, 12, and 13. Then it starts sliding. You got Florida State down to 18, Georgia Tech 19, and the Florida Gators at 20. All right, let's get into today's show. I'm going to start with some of the biggest developments of the weekend. Some of the biggest developments of the weekend include South Carolina's big commitment weekend. Yeah, they didn't play great against Ole Miss, but that didn't stop them from racking up commitments. Wide receiver Malik Clark, he commits. He was a recent decommitment from Florida State. They add another wide receiver, Jordan Gidron, and tight end Jamel House, who's in the 2026 class. So South Carolina, although they didn't win on the field, their recruiting momentum is there, and you see it. There's also Donovan Murph. He's still trending. Another elite wide receiver who just reclassified as well. He's trending to South Carolina, and maybe by the end of the weekend, he could be committed. We'll see. Donovan Murph, I know Steve Wiltfong already put a pick in for him, but 3 commitments this weekend, South Carolina fans. How are you feeling about that? The next major development I want to talk about is Georgia suffered a decommitment. Or did they? Stefan Shivers says that he is reopening his recruitment, but in the same breath, he kind of says that he's still committed. So is he reopening or is he committed? I'm going to say he's more on the side of decommitment, maybe. To go out on Saturday morning and say that you're reopening your recruitment, I think there's a message behind that. I think that he wants to kind of keep his foot in that UGA class, but 2, he wants to take a look around. So it's 6'4.5", 380 pounds. He committed to Georgia in March, but now ready to maybe take a look around. We'll see what Shivers ends up doing. We're going to talk more about that with Jeremy Johnson coming up here in a minute. But right now, I want to talk Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is great. You guys know the game. You pick 2 or more players, then select more or less on their stat line. I've been going hard on Travis Hunter and over on his receiving yards. But with Colorado on the bye, I took Cam Ward more than on the passing yards. Bang, I hit on that. Then I took Carson Beck more than 250 yards. Oh, Carson Beck throws for 240. What about you guys? How are your picks this weekend? I love Prize Picks. It's easy. It's fun. It's a great way to play daily fantasy while you watch your favorite college football teams. Let me know your lineup. I got to hit some winners this week. Who we taking? I saw that Colorado, Kansas State lines are out. Give me some winners. Comment section below. Prize Pick is the most fun way to make a little money during football season. Here's what we're going to do. Go to prizepicks.com/inside scoop and use promo code inside scoop. When you deposit $5, you get $50. So even if you put that $5 in and you lose, you still are going to have $50 there to keep and play with. So go to prizepicks.com/inside scoop and use promo code inside scoop. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's get into the next major development. That was Georgia beats Auburn twice on Saturday. Yes, they won on the field 31-13, but the other win, it came at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning when number 5 running back Ousmane Kromah committed to Georgia over Auburn. So in the same day that Georgia beat Auburn on the field, they also beat them for the number 5 ranked running back in America. Now Tennessee, Florida State, they were both in it, but when it came down to decision time, there was 2 teams that mattered. It was Georgia. It was Auburn. Georgia wins out. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think Georgia really spent the time recruiting Kromah as much as some of these other teams. But when you're hot, you're hot. And Kromah wanted on board. He commits to the Dogs. All right, next development we got to talk about. The Mario Nash recruitment is heating up. He's a committed offensive tackle. He committed to Mississippi State in June, but it just feels like his recruitment is taking off. This weekend, he took an official visit to FSU. It's 6'4", 270 out of the state of Mississippi. That's not going to be his last visit he takes. Now, Ole Miss, FSU, and LSU are kind of the main teams right now trying to flip Mario Nash from Mississippi State. But when you look at the available offensive tackles in America, I mean, right now there's only one uncommitted 5-star. That's Andrew Babalola. None of the teams mentioned are really in it for him. So I'm not quite sure that these are going to be the final teams that end up trying to flip Mario Nash from Mississippi State. But this weekend, he was at Florida State on that official visit, talked to Steve Wiltfong. He thinks that FSU has a great shot to land him, that they can land him, but his recruitment's not over. Like I said, still committed to Mississippi State, but Ole Miss, FSU, LSU, they're all circling. All right, the last major development of the weekend was 5-star defensive lineman Jahkeem Stewart finally making the announcement that he intends to reclassify. He'll no longer be the number 1 recruit in the 2026 class. He moves himself up to the 2025 class. We're going to talk more about this with Shea Dixon, but what it means is he has about 10 to 12 weeks before he makes a decision. Steve Wiltfong says that he is going to sign on the early signing period in mid-December. So his recruitment really begins now. And this weekend, he's going to take a visit to Oregon. That'll be an official visit. He's also going to take official visits to LSU, Ohio State, and USC. So we see 4 teams coming out, emerging as the favorites. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we have another team or two, maybe a Texas, maybe a Miami, maybe an Alabama, enter the picture. But in the end, I think LSU probably the favorite here. Ohio State, USC, Oregon, they're all going to try to sway him. Now, he's from the state of Louisiana. He'll be ranked the number 2 player in that state for this class. LSU already has Harlan Berry, the number 1 player in the state of Louisiana, committed to them. Are they going to add Jahkeem Stewart as well? We'll see. The race for Jahkeem Stewart starts today because he is now part of the 2025 class. So those are the major developments. What do you guys think was the most important development of the weekend? Was it something maybe that I didn't even mention, or was it one of these? Let me know. Comment section below. Let's talk some LSU recruiting as the Tigers, they took advantage of their bye week with bringing in some big official visitors. On this video, I got Shea Dixon from the Bengal Tiger, and we're going to talk about a big 5-star reclassification. News just dropped on that. Also recapping those big official visits that happened over the weekend, and a look ahead to what could be a big recruiting weekend as Ole Miss is coming to town on Saturday. But before we get going, LSU fans, do me a favor right now and hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel. It's the best recruiting channel on YouTube, and we love talking LSU football, so go ahead and hit subscribe. All right, let's bring in Shea Dixon, Bengal Tiger. Now, Jahkeem Stewart, we got to talk Jahkeem Stewart. He's a big 5-star that reclassified from the 26 class to the 25 class. He was the number 1 recruit. Now he's the number 14 overall. So my question to you is, when is the next time we'll see him on campus at LSU?
Yeah, he said that he's locked in a handful of visits, and he tweeted out which schools would be involved here. But LSU obviously would land an official visit. He will be back at LSU for the Alabama game. That's the first weekend in November, Josh. So about a month away, he'll be back on campus. And he was on campus just a week or so ago for whenever they played UCLA. So has visited once already, will visit again. And like I said, I think they'll probably squeeze maybe one more visit in there. So you'll have an official, a couple of unofficials, and then signing day gets here in a hurry, Josh.
All right, so if you trust the recruiting prediction machine, like I trust the recruiting prediction machine, then you'll see that LSU currently leads with a 91% prediction rate on the recruiting prediction machine. So my question to you is, if LSU leads right now, who do you think the biggest threat is?
You know, I think a lot of people have thought Southern Cal, and that could be the truth. I think there's some connections there with their coaching staff to New Orleans that have helped out. But I'll ride with what Steve Wiltfong said, and I won't speak for him, but that Oregon and Ohio State have been major players here. They've gotten into campus, and now they land on this final list. If you were to make me, as you are, Josh, pick one, I think this would probably be LSU Ohio State battle. It just seems to me that he's made a ton of trips there. we know they recruit at the highest of clips, and they've been on him for a while. So for me, I would say my wild card would be Ohio State.
Shay, I got a question because this is kind of a unique situation with Jahkeem Stewart. So he enters his freshman year. He transfers high schools, has to sit out his freshman year of high school. He plays his sophomore year of high school. Really good. We got him as a 5-star, the number 1 player overall. But then he transfers so he can do this reclassification. So this is another transfer. So he has to sit out this year. Now he announces that he's reclassifying and he's going to enroll in the spring, right? Okay. So if I'm doing the math correctly here, that means he's only playing 1 year of high school football?
That's correct. I think that's kind of the point of conversation that a lot of people are having right now about whether it's his ranking or maybe way more importantly, just development and where he's at with his game. We've seen guys who were basketball players who ended up playing football as a senior, or even a guy like Toby Hastrup in this class out of Maid Creek in Texas. He just ran track and picked up football as a senior. But yes, there's guys who have only played 1 year. Usually that was a senior year. Sometimes you get injured after you play a year and then you get injured. Maybe you only played 2 years. But non-injury related, we have not seen this where you transferred, were ineligible as a freshman, played as a sophomore, transferred again in order to reclassify. Reclassify meaning you will skip your senior year, but because of making the move to reclassify from St. Aug to Endicott, these are 2 schools in New Orleans, he was ineligible again. So 2 of the past 3 seasons, he's been ineligible, which leaves him just working with his trainer and doing stuff away from the field. He's not even able right now to practice with Edna Carr. So it's such a unique situation for any kid, Josh, let alone someone who is being touted as one of the best defensive linemen, a 5-star type prospect that's out there. We thought we still had 2 years of high school football in front of us, and you look up and yes, he's reclassifying, but he won't play another down of high school football, skipping 2 years basically to go to a college campus. And whenever he plays in his first college game, that will be the first time he's played in a game since November, December of 2024 or 2023, excuse me. So this is a very, very unique situation where we just don't see it very often. And I think that's why it's going to be one to pay attention to once he gets to college and how that development goes from there.
And I bring it up not to slight him, because look at the teams that are recruiting, right? Everybody still values him as a 5-star, as a top 20 player in the country. But I just saw that and thought it was interesting, the fact that, he's only going to play one season before entering college football. So we'll see what happens there. But I want to move on and talk about official visitors that were on campus during LSU's bye week. I know you said that there was double-digit visitors, right? But were there any non-LSU commits on campus?
Yeah, only one out of the double-digit visitors was not currently committed to LSU. He is committed. He's just committed to Houston. That's Jacob Bradford coming out of Catholic High. He's a senior. He's the older brother of Blaine Bradford at Catholic High, another DB who we've got ranked as the number 1 safety, a top 10 player in the country. And Jacob, as a senior at Catholic High, Josh, the connection here is, remember, Tulane has been a great football team the past few years. Willie Fritz built them up. He took that job at Houston, and then he just went heavy on recruiting Louisiana players, knowing that, hey, look, LSU can't take everybody. Let's go in there and grab a lot of guys who can play at this level. And Jacob was one of a handful of guys out of Louisiana that committed to Houston. But when the offer came from LSU before his senior season, he's told us that they've been in almost daily contact, if not every other day, that they're pushing heavily for him as a nickel star type player, which is kind of a versatile safety who can play down in the box. And I really do think that, but whether it's by the time people are watching this or signing day, I think he flips from Houston to LSU. So LSU has 26 commits. They have a top 3 class. They want to sign 25 to 30. So we're not expecting many more, right, Josh? So this is one that I would circle and say, okay, they can go out there and flip him, keep him home. And then if you add another piece or 2, which is expected, then you've capped off a pretty great class.
All right, Shane, let's look ahead to this weekend. We got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss coming to town. What do you expect this visitor list to look like? I'm sure there's going to be some big-time recruits on campus.
There'll be a lot of big names on campus, and I think it plays off what I just said with as this 2025 class is basically filled up, right? All the heavy lifting and more is done, and you're putting together the finishing pieces. Then you looked at 2026. Jahkeem Stewart's no longer in that mix. He'll be back in town later, but there's a new number one in Louisiana, Lamar Brown here at UGA. He'll be on campus. Like I said, Blaine Bradford is a top 10 player in the country. He moves up in state as the number two player now. He'll be on campus. And they've already got 4 commits for 2026, all from New Orleans. So they're going to go heavy on Louisiana. I think a lot of guys come in for this game. Then I would look for that Bama game a month from now when Jahkeem's in to be the other big visitor weekend. But I will note that this weekend is homecoming. It's also 100 years of Tiger Stadium. This is the 100th year of Tiger Stadium and games being played. And Ole Miss is the game that they're bringing all the former alumni back for, football players, to celebrate. So not only will there be recruits, but a lot of former Tigers whose faces will be pretty recognizable will be out on the field before the game getting recognized. And it is a sellout, Josh. So despite Ole Miss's loss to Kentucky, despite LSU's loss to USC, throw it out. This one is going to be a jam-packed game at night in Tiger Stadium.
All right, LSU fans, as we gear up for another big recruiting weekend with Ole Miss coming to town, let's talk Jahkeem Stewart in the comments section. How are we feeling? What a massive addition Jahkeem Stewart would be to late in this 2025 cycle. We know everybody needs defensive linemen, and there's not many elite ones available. Jahkeem Stewart reclassifying. How are we feeling? Let me know, LSU fans, comment section below. Let's talk UGA recruiting. The Dogs, they beat Auburn 31-13 on Saturday, but they actually beat Auburn twice. We're going to talk about it and how they pulled that off with Jeremy Johnson of Dogs HQ. Also, some other high priority targets on campus. But before we get into it all, Georgia fans, do me a favor right now. Jump on board and hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We love talking Dogs recruiting. We're going to do it all season long. So jump on board and hit subscribe. All right, let's bring on Jeremy Johnson of Dogs HQ. Jeremy, let's just talk Ousmane Kromah, the number 5 running back in America, picks Georgia over Auburn right before kickoff. And for much of the cycle, Ousmane Kromah was trending really to anybody but Georgia. It was FSU at points. It was Auburn at points. But what did Georgia do? Or did they just kind of put the pedal to the metal on his recruitment? Like, what did Georgia do to turn that one in their favor?
I mean, that's the best way I can describe it, because they put the pedal to the metal. Josh Crawford coming over in, I want to say it was January when he got hired, but Josh Crawford taking over and evaluating that running back group. He kind of circled Ousmane Kromah as his guy, and you know, he got the blessing from Kirby Smart to go get him. That was the message, and that's what he did. I mean, he had a great relationship with Ousmane, and it paid off on Saturday. I think this wasn't something that happened within the last 3 weeks. I think this summer is when things really started to turn for Georgia in Georgia's favor. You know, I started hearing buzz that, hey, Georgia's a little more in this, and I think people are saying. I think Crawford was at the head of it. I can't stress it enough that I think he was the one who helped, you know, win this over for Georgia in the long run.
Yeah, and Kromah was actually supposed to announce that decision last Saturday, but hey, it worked out. He ended up delaying it a week, and it worked out great for the Dogs. They get 2 wins on Saturday over Auburn. Speaking of that game, you had a great article of recruit observations that you put out on Dogs HQ Sunday morning. And one of the things that you pointed out in there is that there was a couple safeties on campus that Georgia's circling back on. Lagonza Shady Hayward, Eric Winters, who's committed to Auburn, Hayward committed to Tennessee, and then Anquan Fagans, who's also committed to Auburn. What did you make one of these safeties being on campus? Does it tell you that Georgia really wants to land another one? And what did you think about these flip targets? Who stood out to you?
Yeah, I definitely think, you know, the position has kind of come back into the forefront a little bit just because of Rashad Johnson's decommitment and it'll flip to Texas A&M a few weeks back. And I think they're kind of trying to gauge the interest of some of these guys that they've had great relationships with. And, you know, another guy that we didn't mention was Rashawn Dinkins, who is a Georgia Tech commit that wasn't able to make the game, but he was invited as well. So, you know, having those guys in the crosshairs that tells me that, hey, yeah, like I said, this is a big priority moving forward. Lagonza Hayward is one that really stands out to me. He's a very physical player. He's a monster athlete. I know that T-Rob spent a little time with him before the game. Travaris Robinson, the co-defense coordinator, defensive backs coach of Georgia, he spent a lot of time with him pregame. They have a really good relationship. Robinson offered Lagonza Hayward at Alabama, and he was one of the key pieces for Georgia even getting involved in the first place. So the fact that there's still some friendship, some fun times there to be had. They were laughing and joking and having a really good time before the game, and that kind of relationship is something that you have to pause at, because this is a guy that is committed to Tennessee, but then he also has this really good relationship with Georgia's defensive backs coach and co-defensive coordinator. So he's the one that stands out the most to me. Obviously, Eric Winters has been to Georgia a ton. I know he's committed to Auburn, and I know that Georgia has been communicating with him as well. I was able to confirm that with him this morning. So he's one to watch as well, but I kind of feel like that's going to be a tough battle. Obviously, you mentioned Anquan Fegans. I feel the same way about him. I'm sure there's some communication. Coach Robinson coached his brother for a while at Alabama, and then Dante Williams also coached his brother at USC. So there's a lot of closeness there as well. But the other guy is Rashawn Dinkins, a guy who I expect to be on campus at some point, that is also a part of this equation. So they have the options, and there are a couple guys that are on the board that are realistic options at this point.
Yeah, and I think Lagonza Shady Hayward probably stands out the most to me, because I feel like when he made his decision, that was the most heads-up battle that Georgia had. I mean, not to say that they didn't offer and were entertaining Winters and Fagans, but I felt like Hayward chose Tennessee directly over Georgia, and now that it's circle back season, the Hayward showing up on campus kind of stood out to me. All right. A couple other big names on campus. I mean, of course, we could talk 5-star plus Justice Terry, but he's trending so heavily to the Dogs that there's really not much question involved in that one, at least right now. But the one intriguing name that did hit me was wide receiver CJ Wiley. He was back in Athens. Now, he's committed to FSU, was in Tallahassee a couple weeks ago, but there was rumors swirling, and Steve Wiltfong was always confident that Wiley would make it to Athens. Of course, he shows up. So how do you feel right now about Wiley and Georgia? Because at the time of his decision, I think a lot of people were shocked that it was Florida State. I don't think as many people would have been shocked if it was LSU, and I think Georgia was maybe the favorite at the time of his decision. But, of course, it's FSU is where he committed to a couple months ago. But now, how do you feel about Georgia?
I mean, I feel a little better today than I did yesterday. I mean, I really feel like Florida State has a lot of, they have a real stranglehold there. And I really feel like, it's going to take some huge effort from Georgia to get in there and take him from Florida State, because that's what it would be. It would be Georgia taking CJ Wiley from Florida State, because he's entrenched there. I really think he likes what Florida State has going, but getting him on campus is huge, because he's another one that has great relationships with that staff. It's been a long-standing relationship. They've been recruiting him since his freshman year of high school, so he knows all of those guys. And just seeing him yesterday, getting to see him he's a very stoic guy, and he doesn't laugh and giggle and play. Like, he's really usually business. He's all business most of the time. I got to see him crack a few smiles yesterday, and that to me that's not nothing, because if you can make CJ Wiley laugh, that means he really likes you. So that was the thing that I took away from it, is that getting him on campus and getting that in-person time is invaluable in that recruitment. But obviously there's a long way to go. There's a couple months, and Georgia's definitely in it. They're still communicating. He's listening. He's listening to a couple schools. I know Notre Dame offered recently, and that's also a school that could have some interest. But he's locked in right now. But that could change over the next 2 months, and I feel like Georgia's in the best position of anyone to be the one that capitalizes if something should happen.
It reminds me of the KJ Bolden recruitment, because at the time, KJ Bolden also made a summer decision. And at the time, there was two other teams that people thought he was going to pick, either Georgia or Auburn. He picks Florida State. A couple months later, he flips to Georgia. CJ Wiley, kind of a very similar vibe to that one. But like you said, there is a very good connection between FSU and Wiley. So we just got to follow the visit, see what happens down the road. But CJ Wiley in Athens, I don't think it was nothing, put it that way. All right, another big name. The last big name I want to talk about was offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell. And we know Georgia likes these big old offensive linemen, and he's at 2026, not just any 2026, the number one offensive lineman in the 26 class. And his recruitment's heating up because he's been taking some visits this fall. Where do you think Georgia stands early on with Jackson Cantwell?
I definitely think they're in that top group. I mean, I don't know. I've never been to Missouri, but I know it's not an easy flight from Atlanta or wherever. That's a long trip for him to keep making, and he's made that trip. I want to say 3 times now this year. So the fact that he keeps coming back to Georgia, as you say, follow the visits. That is the key here. Is that he keeps coming back. Every time you talk to him about Georgia, it's something positive and it's something different every time. He's actually analyzing what Georgia is to him, and I think that's big. And also, there's a lot of communication. I mean, Georgia talks to him every other day. He got to meet with Kirby Smart yesterday, and he's a 2026 offensive lineman. So that's also, that tells you what they think of him.
Mm-hmm.
And you start looking at Georgia's depth chart. I mean, they look good at tackle right now. You got Xavier Truss, and you got Monroe Freeland, who plays a lot, and you got Bo Hewley, and Johns Jackson. All those guys are still on campus, but 2 years from now, you're gonna start looking for guys to replace those people. And where do you go? And now you start looking at Jackson Cantrell. If he's able to get in there and go to Georgia, hey, we got an elite guy to come in here and replace some of these guys. So I think he's a high priority for Georgia. I think Georgia's in it. I think Georgia is right there with Missouri and some of these other schools that we talk about a lot. So I think this weekend was really good on that front with him. Just the fact that he just was there. I mean, getting him on campus is always huge.
Yeah. All right. Well, we just scratched the surface. Dogs HQ has a ton of info coming out of this busy visit weekend. Jeremy Johnson, appreciate you taking a little time to talk some Georgia recruiting with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Let's talk some Oregon Ducks recruiting. As Oregon, they took care of business on Friday night against Michigan State. And as we saw this weekend, nothing comes easy in conference play. So good to see the Ducks get that win. Also, major developments on the recruiting trail. And I got Justin Hopkins from Scoop Duck on this video. We're going to talk about the visit list for this Ohio State game. Also, 5-star defensive lineman Jahkeem Stewart made a big announcement, and it involves the Ducks. So we're going to talk about that as well. But first, you Oregon fans, do me a favor and hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. We need you guys subscribed. Go ahead, hit it. All right, let's bring on Justin Hopkins of Scoop Duck. And let's start with the big news that happened on Saturday. Jahkeem Stewart, the number 1 player in the 2026 class, he reclassifies up to 2025. What does that mean? He is now the number 14 ranked player in the 2025 class, and Oregon makes his top list. He's going to be there this weekend, but overall, just generally speaking, in this recruitment, now that we only have about 10 or 12 weeks until the early signing period, where do you think Oregon stands?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that they're going to get him on campus. It's going to be his first official visit. And, that's a double-edged sword, right? Sometimes when you're first, you get to kind of set the bar and set the mood and set the tone. But on the bad side, you're the first visit and he's going to take more, right?
Right.
He's got that top 4. I personally think that Oregon's probably 3rd or 4th right now. I think there's a lot of buzz around USC. There's a lot of buzz around LSU for him at the moment. But, as I mentioned, with him taking this official visit, Oregon's going to kind of have its chance to come out swinging and could ultimately set the tone. And, I know the college football fans watching this don't need me to tell them, but that atmosphere is probably going to be pretty electric with Oregon and Ohio State this weekend.
Yeah, and if the Ducks can win, having Jahkeem Stewart on campus for an official visit that weekend, we might be changing our tune of because I agree with you. I do think they're probably 3rd or 4th in this recruitment right now. But like you said, a big visit weekend. If things go right for Oregon, we could be singing a different tune coming out of the weekend. All right, speaking of, let's go back to this weekend. The Ducks played on Friday night, and you don't usually see big visit weekends go down on a Friday night. You and I have covered a lot of Friday night games. It's usually they punt on even having a visit weekend on Friday nights. But the Ducks did not. They had a bunch of top targets on campus, especially for the 2026 class. Who should Oregon fans be on notice about that was on campus Friday night?
Yeah, there was some really intriguing, more so 2026 targets. Zion Ely kind of being the headliner, if you will, of that group, making his way out. Had a couple teammates with him. And Aiden Harris was another one that was on campus as well. I believe he's On3's number 1 ranked defensive lineman in 2026. Ely is the number 1 ranked 2026 edge in the class. So if you're gonna start there, you really want to build those that line of scrimmage and that defensive line for Oregon. Yeah. I'd like to talk about Ely for a second because I think this is either like his third or fourth visit out to Oregon already early in his recruitment. And even though, he's an East Coast guy and Oregon's on the West Coast, I think the Ducks and Dan Lanning have prioritized him. And I don't want to say necessarily that Oregon leads, but they're certainly not outside of that top three, in my opinion, early on for Ely.
All right, let's take a look ahead to next weekend. Now, we're going to be talking a lot about this Oregon-Ohio State matchup as the week goes on, and this visitor list is going to grow. But there's one name that really stands out to me, and that's five-star corner Naeem Alford. I think it's kind of significant that he's taking his first visit to Oregon this season before he takes his first visit to Ohio State. There was some that were wondering if he was going to show up to this Iowa game this weekend. Naeem Alford was not in Columbus, but he's going to be in Eugene this weekend. What does this mean for the Ducks?
Yeah, that's I know you and I have done a lot of recruiting through the years. That's certainly one interesting storyline, right? An Ohio State commit is going to visit and see Ohio State for the first time in the city of Eugene. Pretty odd. Don't normally see that. But yeah, I think, myself, I think a lot of others, Steve Wiltfong, everybody, Auburn and Oregon have been two schools that have been frequently mentioned for Alford for quite some time. And I feel like that's more of the battle than Ohio State keeping him at this point. So I think the Ducks have done a really good job there and kind of laid in the weeds. And I know Auburn made a really big push and was, gaining a lot of momentum there. But I think Oregon's just quietly been in a really good spot for Naeem Alford. And he's really been the guy they wanted to kind of complete this, cornerback, defensive back group for them in this cycle. So, again, I know we just mentioned it with Stewart, but of course, this atmosphere, this game, it's going to be electric. If Oregon could be able to win, that would obviously be even better for the Ducks. ESPN game day, everything. You're going to have a lot to sell if you're Oregon.
Who's some early names that you're anticipating? I mean, I know we named Jahkeem Stewart and Naeem Alford, just 2 5-stars right off the top, but other names that you're anticipating being on campus this weekend?
I know a pretty big contingent of the commits will be in town. Sounds like Akili Smith Jr. will be in town. Several others. I don't know why I'm totally blank. Cooper Perry actually just visited, and he's coming back. Jordan Davison, the running back from Mater Dei. So a lot of those guys be in town, which helps with the uncommitted guys. Not necessarily headliners in the recruiting world nationally, but for Oregon fans, they are. McKay Madsen, a linebacker, and Caleb Burns, a linebacker committed to Baylor. Those are a couple of guys that Oregon offered here late in the cycle, in the fall window here. And those guys should be on campus. And linebacker is a huge priority for Oregon right now. Another name and also another priority, Oregon's making a pretty big push with Penn State tight end Andrew Olish. Yeah. And he may also be in town for this weekend. As we both know, there's a whole week ahead. And these visits will get finalized. But I expect Oregon will have, anywhere from 15 to 25, 4-star or better 2025 and 2026 targets on campus.
Oh, and that could balloon to like upwards of 50 by the time Saturday rolls around. So we'll be keeping an eye on that all week. Duck fans, talk to us. Who do you want to see on campus this weekend? Is there anybody that you feel Oregon must get to campus for this Ohio State game? Let us know. Comment section below.